You see kids on the corner. They're laughing. They're learning. But what are they learning? A priest in Turin watched this in 1835 and saw the future breaking. John Bosco walked the streets where boys as young as 7 worked 14-hour shifts in factories. No parents around, no guidance. Just other kids teaching them how to steal bread, how to curse, how to survive. He saw where it led. Prisons packed with teenagers. Gallows busy on Saturdays. A generation learning life from the gutter because nobody else would teach them. What did he see exactly? What did those kids become? And what did he do that changed how we think about raising children? This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Silesian Historical Institute archives in Turin, specifically the original case logs Bosco kept from 1835 to 1888, and the documented court records from the Piedmont juvenile justice system that tracked over 2,000 boys through the Turin prison system between 1830 and 1860. These aren't generic church histories. These are daily logs with names, ages, crimes, and outcomes. Now back to the information. They're clustered in groups teaching each other. One group plays dice, another practices picking pockets on each other. An older boy, maybe 15, shows the younger ones how to distract a merchant. Bosco watches for an hour. He writes in his diary that night, "These children have no father but the street." Piedmont court records from 1835 to 1840 show that 72% of juvenile arrests in Turin involved boys who listed no fixed residence and no parental supervision. The average age at first arrest was 11 years and 4 months. The most common crime was theft of food. The second most common was assault. The third was vandalism of church property. Once arrested, these boys went to the same prisons as adults. The Generale prison in Turin held 930 inmates in 1838. 147 were under 16. 23 were under 10. Where did you learn to steal? From other boys. Where did you sleep before arrest? Streets, stables, under bridges. Did your parents teach you to read? Most say they never knew their parents, or their parents died when they were young. One boy, 16, tells Bosco his father died in a factory accident when he was 6. His mother worked as a washerwoman, but died of typhus 3 years later. He lived on streets. Other boys taught him everything. How to find food, how to fight, how to hate authority. He's in prison for stabbing another boy over a piece of bread. The older boys in these packs become teachers. They teach the younger boys that adults are enemies, police are hunters, priests are liars, work is slavery, the only family is the pack. Bosco's report includes a cold fact. Of the 63 boys he interviewed, 51 had learned their criminal skills directly from other boys, not from adults. 9 had been taught by older teenage criminals who used them as tools. 3 had acted alone. The average age these boys first joined a street pack was 8 years and 7 months. It's a place where boys can come after work, or instead of wandering streets. The first location is a shack near Porta Palazzo. The first day, 6 boys show up. Bosco teaches them to read using newspapers. He teaches them basic math using market prices. He teaches them a trade, carpentry, shoemaking, tailoring. But most importantly, he teaches them how to live, how to speak without cursing, how to solve disputes without fists, how to see a future beyond the next meal. The boys are suspicious. Why is this priest helping us? What does he want? Bosco wants nothing except to replace what the street packs taught them with something else. The police report back. The boys are learning trades. Crime in Porta Palazzo drops. Bosco expands. The street taught them theft, so he taught them trades that earned money legally. The street taught them that adults were enemies, so he became a friend. He played games with them, soccer, card games, races. He joked with them, he ate with them. He listened to their stories without judgment, and slowly the boys started to change. He joined the oratory in March. Bosco taught him to make shoes. By 1844, Bozzetti had a job in a cobbler's shop. He earned enough to rent a room. By 1848, he owned his own small shop. He never committed another crime. Bosco kept a log. Bozzetti is entry number 7. The log runs to 1875. It contains 1,268 names. Of those, 942 never returned to prison after joining the oratory. That's a 74% success rate in an era when recidivism among juvenile offenders exceeded 90%. On the street, the peer curriculum is survival through violence and theft. In the oratory, Bosco flipped it. He trained the older boys who had reformed to teach the younger boys, peer to peer. But now the lessons were different. How to negotiate, how to save money, how to plan a week ahead, how to read a contract, how to avoid fights. The older boys became mentors. The younger boys listened because the teachers were like them, not distant adults. Bosco documented this. His notes from 1847 describe a boy named Carlo Gastini, age 15. Carlo had been in the oratory for 2 years. He was learning blacksmithing. Bosco asked Carlo to mentor 3 new boys, ages 10, 11, and 12. These 3 had just come from the streets. They were hostile. They cursed. They fought each other. Bosco gave Carlo one instruction. Show them what you learned here, not by talking, but by being. Carlo worked his apprenticeship. The three boys watched. They saw Carlo earning money. They saw him respected by the blacksmith. They saw him eating regular meals. They saw him planning to open his own shop someday. Within 4 months, all three boys enrolled in trades. Within a year, none had been arrested. Bosco's note on this case ends with one line: "Children believe children before they believe us." The classes ran from 7 in the evening until 10. The curriculum was practical: reading, writing, basic accounting, and trade skills. But also life skills: how to write a letter, how to manage a budget, how to deal with an unfair employer without getting fired or arrested, how to find housing, how to avoid the street packs that still prowled Turin. By 1854, 61 older boys served as peer mentors. These mentors weren't paid, they volunteered. Why? Because they remembered what the streets taught them and they wanted younger boys to learn something different. Bosco observed that peer mentors often succeeded where adult instructors failed. A boy who had been in street fights could teach conflict resolution more effectively than a priest who had never thrown a punch. A boy who had stolen food could teach the value of earning money more credibly than a businessman who had never been hungry. The authority came from shared experience. If a mentor started slipping, missing work, getting into arguments, showing signs of returning to old patterns, Bosco intervened immediately, not with punishment, with conversation. What's happening? What changed? How can we help? The goal was to keep the mentors strong so they could keep the mentees strong. Of the 61 peer mentors active in 1854, 57 remained in good standing through 1856. 4 left the program. 3 returned to street life. 1 moved to another city for work. Piedmont police records that tracked juvenile crime rates in Turin districts year by year. Now back to the information. The pamphlet describes what happens when children are left to learn from other children without guidance. They form hierarchies based on strength. They develop codes based on survival. They see the world as hostile. They trust only the pack. Once these patterns set in, they're hard to break. Bosco estimates it takes 6 months to a year to reprogram a boy who has spent 2 years in street packs. The longer a child learns from unguided peers, the harder the correction. The street packs thrive on secrecy and distrust of authority. Harsh discipline reinforces that distrust. What changes behavior is relationship. A boy who trusts you will listen. A boy who fears you will deceive. Rules exist, but are explained. Violations bring conversation. Why did you do this? What were you thinking? What could you do differently? The groups are tracked for 1 year, starting January 1857. Group 1 has 38 boys. Group 2 has 41. By December 1857, Group 1 has seen 14 boys leave the program. 9 return to street life. 5 move for family reasons. Group 2 has seen 6 boys leave. 2 return to street life. 4 move for family reasons. The retention rate is higher. The success rate is higher. Bosco publishes the results. Educators start paying attention. If their friends know trades, literacy, planning, and respect, that's the curriculum. You can't stop peer learning. It's how humans are wired, but you can shape what peers teach each other by controlling who the peers are and what they know. Over 1,500 boys have passed through the program. The recidivism rate is under 26% compared to the national juvenile recidivism rate of 87%. The employment rate among oratory graduates is 91%. The literacy rate is 83% compared to a national youth literacy rate of 34%. The government asks how he achieved this. Bosco explains the peer teaching model. Older boys teaching younger boys in a structured environment with adult oversight. The government funds 3 new oratories in Milan, Genoa, and Florence. The total enrollment across all 12 locations is 973 boys. The staff includes 42 adult instructors and 118 peer mentors. The budget comes from private donations and government grants. The cost per boy per year is 72 lire. The cost of housing a boy in prison is 140 lire. The government sees the financial logic. Prevention is cheaper than incarceration. But the government also sees something else. These boys are becoming citizens. They're not just avoiding crime. They're contributing to society. They're opening shops. They're raising families. They're participating in civic life. Bosco has created a pipeline from street to citizen. The peer learning that once taught them to survive through theft now teaches them to thrive through work. The shift is simple, but profound. Change the peers, change the outcome. Kept teaching, kept being patient. By September 1858, Rua started to change. He attended classes. He practiced tailoring. He asked questions. By 1860, Rua had a job in a tailor shop. By 1863, he was a peer mentor himself. By 1870, he managed his own tailoring business, employing 4 apprentices. By 1883, 5 years before Bosco's death, Rua was leading one of the oratories. The street pack could have taught Rua to be a criminal. Domenico taught him to be a craftsman, peer to peer, different content, different outcome. His parents sent him to the oratory. Bosco assigned him to peer mentor Carlo Gastini, the same Carlo who had reformed years earlier. Carlo taught Giovanni carpentry, but more than that, Carlo taught Giovanni how to see time differently. The street teaches you to think in hours. Where's the next meal? Where do I sleep tonight? Carlo taught Giovanni to think in years. What do I want to be at 20? What skills do I need to get there? What choices today lead to that future? Giovanni absorbed this. By 1855, he was training as a carpenter. By 1860, he had steady work. By 1865, he was teaching carpentry to younger boys at the oratory. By 1877, he was a priest and educator running an oratory in Argentina. The transformation from rock-throwing street kid to international educator took 27 years. It started with one peer mentor teaching him to think beyond tomorrow. Teaching forced them to articulate values they had absorbed. It made those values conscious and permanent. He'd been on streets for 8 years. He'd been arrested 6 times. He'd been in 3 different street packs. Bosco assigned him to peer mentor Michel Rua. Luca resisted. He fought other boys. He stole tools from the workshop. He cursed instructors. Rua tried everything. Patient teaching, firm boundaries, shared meals, conversations. Nothing worked. After 7 months, Luca left. He was arrested again in October 1868 for armed robbery. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Bosco visited him there in 1869. Luca told him, "The streets taught me too well. I can't unlearn it. Catch a boy at 8 or 9 before the street pack fully shapes him, and the success rate is high. Catch him at 15 after years of street education, and the success rate drops." Bosco's data showed this clearly. Boys who entered the oratory before age 12 had an 81% success rate. Boys who entered between 13 and 15 had a 63% success rate. Boys who entered after 15 had a 44% success rate. The lesson was clear. Intervene early before bad peer teaching becomes permanent. More play, more games, more storytelling. But the peer teaching model remained. Older boys in the 7 to 12 range mentored younger boys. A 10-year-old who had learned to read taught an 8-year-old. An 11-year-old who had learned basic carpentry showed a 9-year-old how to use tools safely. The mentorship was age appropriate, but the principle was the same. Guided peer teaching with positive content. By 1875, Bosco operated 26 oratories across Italy and had expanded into France and Spain. Total enrollment exceeded 2,000 boys. The peer mentor course numbered 237. The adult staff numbered 94. The annual budget was 108,000 lire, funded by donations, government grants, and revenue from workshops that sold goods produced by the boys. The workshops were key. They gave boys real work experience and generated income that sustained the program. A carpentry workshop in Turin produced furniture sold to local buyers. A print shop in Genoa produced books and pamphlets. A metalworking shop in Florence produced tools and hardware. The boys learned trades while contributing to program sustainability. It was young men who had learned life from guided peers instead of street packs. The employment rate among oratory graduates in 1875 was 89%. The recidivism rate was 23%. The marriage rate was 76%, meaning most graduates went on to form families. The civic participation rate, measured by voter registration and community involvement, was 61%. These weren't statistics Bosco invented. They came from follow-up surveys conducted by Salesian staff who tracked graduates for 5 years after leaving the program. By 1880, 43% of boys entering the oratories were sons or nephews of graduates. The program was self-replicating. Good peer teaching in one generation created parents who valued good peer teaching in the next generation. The core message: children will learn from their peers no matter what you do. The question is not whether peer learning happens, but what content the peers transmit. If you abandon children to learn from other abandoned children, they will teach each other survival strategies that often involve crime. If you guide children to learn from slightly older children who have been taught well, they will teach each other skills and values that lead to productive lives. The difference is not in the mechanism of learning. The mechanism is constant. The difference is in the content of learning. And the content is determined by who the peers are and what they know. Peer teaching works when the peers are carefully selected and trained. Older children teaching younger children under adult supervision produces better outcomes than either pure adult instruction or pure peer learning without guidance. The model spreads. The peer mentor corps exceeds 600. The recidivism rate across all programs averages 28% compared to national juvenile recidivism rates that still hover above 80%. The employment rate averages 87%. The model has proven scalable and replicable. In villages, older siblings taught younger siblings how to farm, cook, and survive. In guilds, apprentices taught newer apprentices. The street packs were just another form of peer learning, but with destructive content. Bosco's innovation was to formalize peer learning in an institutional setting with positive content and adult oversight. He didn't fight human nature, he channeled it. His final document is a memo to the Salesians, the religious order he founded to continue the oratory work. The memo is 7 pages. It contains instructions on maintaining the peer teaching model after his death. Key points: always use older boys to teach younger boys. Always ensure peer mentors are well trained and supervised. Always track outcomes rigorously. Always intervene early before street packs fully form a child's worldview. Always remember that peer learning is neutral. It transmits whatever content the peers possess. Your job is to ensure the peers possess skills, values, and hope instead of violence, theft, and despair. By 1900, there are 131 oratories globally. By 1950, over 600. The model evolves, but the core remains. Guided peer teaching with positive content. The peer is closer to the learner's level. The peer remembers what it was like not to know. The peer uses language the learner understands. But peer learning only works when the peer has accurate knowledge and positive values. Peer learning in a gang teaches criminal skills. Peer learning in a structured program teaches productive skills. The mechanism is identical. The outcome depends entirely on content. Bosco saw this in 1835 walking through Porta Palazzo. He saw boys teaching boys. He saw the content was theft, violence, and survival. He asked a question, what if we change the content but keep the mechanism? What if older boys who have learned trades and literacy teach younger boys those same things? What if peer groups form around positive goals instead of survival needs? The experiment ran for 53 years. The data was clear. It worked. He didn't even blame the parents, most of whom had no choice but to work brutal hours to survive. He blamed the absence of any structured alternative. The streets were the default school because nothing else existed. For boys who had parents, but those parents worked all day, the oratory filled the gap between school dismissal and parent arrival. For boys who had no parents, the oratory became a surrogate family. Either way, it prevented the streets from becoming the only teacher. Parents who are absent create vacancies. Other children fill those vacancies. What they teach in those vacancies determines the future. The note goes on, if you cannot be present, ensure the vacancy is filled by someone who will teach well. If you leave the vacancy to chance, chance will fill it with whoever is available. On the street, whoever is available is usually another lost child. That note explains why Bosco's work matters beyond his time. The Industrial Revolution pulled parents into factories. Urbanization broke extended family networks. Children were left unsupervised. Street packs formed. Crime surged. Bosco saw the pattern and interrupted it. But the pattern didn't end with the Industrial Revolution. Every era that separates children from parental guidance creates the same vacuum. And that vacuum fills with peer teaching. The question is always the same. What are the peers teaching? Sometimes it's destructive. Cyberbullying, radicalization, dangerous challenges. But the mechanism is the same. Children learning from other children. Peer to peer. Bosco would recognize the pattern instantly. Track outcomes. Adjust methods based on data. The tools change. The principle doesn't. They compared outcomes to contemporary court records of 3,491 boys who were arrested during the same period, but did not enter any reform program. The oratory boys had a recidivism rate of 27%. The non-oratory boys had a recidivism rate of 83%. The oratory boys had an employment rate at age 25 of 86%. The non-oratory boys had an employment rate at age 25 of 41%. The oratory boys had a life expectancy of 54 years. The non-oratory boys had a life expectancy of 37 years. Same city, same era, same socioeconomic background, different peer learning content, radically different outcomes. Of the oratory graduates who had children, 81% enrolled their children in some form of structured education or youth program. Of the non-oratory comparison group who survived to have children, 32% enrolled their children in structured programs. The oratory graduates valued structured peer learning because they had experienced its effects. The non-oratory group didn't value it because they had only experienced street pack learning. The choice to guide your children's peer learning environment often depends on whether your own peer learning was guided. If we teach them that guidance matters, they will guide their children. If we abandon them to learn from chaos, they will abandon their children to the same. The work we do today shapes the world 50 years from now. Their children attended oratories. Some of those children became priests and educators who opened new oratories. The cycle continued. Guided peer learning producing adults who valued guided peer learning for the next generation. Some oratories became too rigid, focusing on discipline instead of relationship. Retention rates dropped. Some oratories failed to track outcomes, losing the data-driven approach that made the model effective. These oratories eventually closed. The successful ones were those that maintained Bosco's core principles: peer teaching, adult oversight, relationship-based discipline, early intervention, and rigorous outcome tracking. What Bosco understood that many educators missed: children trust children before they trust adults. That's not cynicism. That's developmental psychology. Peers speak the same language. Peers face the same challenges. Peers feel like allies, not authorities. An adult telling a street kid to stop stealing is an outsider giving orders. A peer mentor who used to steal but now earns money through trade is an insider offering proof that change is possible. The credibility is different. The impact is different. It means ensuring peer mentors are trained, healthy, and teaching content that leads somewhere good. The adult role is to maintain quality control on the peer teaching system. Leave the what and the how to chance, and chance fills the gap with whatever is closest. On the streets of Turin, what was closest was crime and violence. In the oratories, what was closest was trade skills and literacy. Same kids, same city, different peer content, different futures. Generala prison in Turin. The grave contained the remains of 73 individuals. Forensic analysis dated them to between 1830 and 1870. 61 of the 73 were under age 18 at time of death. The average age was 15 years and 2 months. Cause of death varied. Disease, malnutrition, violence. These were boys who died in prison. They had learned life from street packs. They had been arrested. They had been incarcerated. They had died before reaching adulthood. The grave was 50 meters from the Porta Palazzo market where Bosco first watched boys teaching boys in 1835. Ages, entry dates, exit dates, outcomes. Of those 1,268, 47 died before age 25. That's 3.7%. In the prison grave, 84% died before age 25. Same neighborhood, same poverty, same lack of parental supervision, different peer learning environment, wildly different survival rates. But he saved most of the ones who walked through his door. And he did it by understanding something simple but profound. Children will learn from their friends. They always have. They always will. The only question is what their friends know and who taught them. If their friends learned life from the street, that's what they'll pass on. If their friends learned life from skilled mentors in a structured environment, that's what they'll pass on. You can't change the mechanism. You can only change the content.